Hey guys, welcome back. I want to talk to you about some common myths being passed around today when it comes to keeping ball python. What is she doing? So I've been keeping ball pythons for almost 30 years now. It was the first pet reptile I had. I went to a local pet shop. I only had 20 bucks on me and I bought a baby ball python hatchlet. And I'd imagine it was wild caught, and I brought it home in the paper bag they gave me stapled up. I had no cage, nothing to take care of this thing. I was 10 years old, and luckily my father helped me get the rest of the supplies so I could keep this as a pet. And I ended up keeping that animal for several years after that. But some of the things that I was told by the pet store at the time to take care of my snake are still practices that are being suggested to new keepers today. So I want to go through a few of those with you so you can avoid making those mistakes, so you know what to believe and what to not take as advice. Now the first one I wanted to go over with you is that ball pythons are boring pet rocks. I mean, look at Beatrice here. She just stands still, she never moves around, and she's just boring. This is false. So, ball pythons, as you'll see in a video we went over recently, all have different personalities. And a lot of the time, it's based on their comfort level and their individual, I guess you'd say, personality. But if you have a ball python that is comfortable in their environment and their husbandry is on point, they can be explorational. I've even seen videos of ball pythons that have learned target training. So they will, when it's time to feed, hold up a target, and the ball python sees the target and knows it's time for food. They'll go touch the target with their nose and then take the food on. So they can be taught. Now, if you just throw them in a bin with nothing in their environment that they can interact with or climb on or do anything with, yes, you're probably going to get a pet rock, because that animal is not going to develop mentally as well as one who has all the correct husbandry and care and places to explore, the right cage sizing, the right substrate. All of this plays a factor. So for this one, ball pythons, yes, they can be boring, they can be pet rocks, but it's probably because of what you are doing in keeping that animal. Another myth is that ball pythons will always go off of food. Now, as a species, this is the one knock people have on them, is that they will go off food. Now, that being said, it is true for those that are breeding age and for breeding ball pythons, they will go off food. But if you're not breeding your animal and you've never had an issue previously and they start to go off of food, then it may be time to start checking your husbandry, make sure your thermostat's working properly, your temperatures are correct, your humidity's right. Something hasn't changed in their environment. I've seen videos from others, keepers, that had a cage that they had bought on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, and it had cat urine inside of it that had dried up. And when they moved the ball python to this cage, it stopped eating. Change is something that will trigger a ball python to go off food. Maybe you changed the substrate you were using. Maybe the temperature dropped. Maybe the humidity dropped or rose. Something is potentially off in the environment. And it is common for them to go off food when something is off in their environment. So I would caution you, if you do have a ball python go off of food and you are not breeding it, to not just dismiss it. It is something you definitely want to look into. It's time to start checking your husbandry, time to start checking your heat source, your thermostat, all of those things, and make sure there's nothing wrong. Because if you wait too long and there is something, say mites, a respiratory infection, something of the sort, then it could be too late by the time you realize that they need some veterinary treatment or something else. All ball pythons are good handling snakes, and they make a great first pet. They're low maintenance. These are all statements that can be true, but it's not the case with every ball python. I've had ball pythons, it's typically adults, that I take into my care as adults that have not been handled at all, that may have been a previous breeder. They do not handle like Beatrice here does. She, as we've talked about, will explore, loves just being curious, looking around, climbing on everything she can in her environment. Others, they do not want to be held. I've had others taken in as adults that will hiss at you every time you pick them up. They don't necessarily bite, but they get very head shy. They will ball up. They aren't always easy to handle, which in turn, in my opinion, does not mean they necessarily make a good pet for a first-time reptile keeper. Typically, your first-time reptile keeper is going to want to hold their animal at some point and interact with it. And some of these ball pythons with this type of personality do not necessarily fit that bill. Low maintenance, like we talked about in the previous one. Sometimes there's things that can happen that make these guys high maintenance. If one of them gets sick, you have to give them shots or you have to give them oral antibiotics. This can be a difficult task, and these animals, if not kept in the right direction, not kept in the right conditions, can be difficult to keep. They will be sick. They will not act appropriately. They will not be the ball python that we all know is a good beginner pet. They could be stressed, sick, any of those things. So don't necessarily believe that all ball pythons are good pets. Ball pythons should be fed in a separate enclosure. This is just bad advice. This was the advice I was given 20, 30 years ago when I was first keeping ball pythons. It is not a great practice. These animals are typically ambush predators. They lie in wait in rodent holes, wait for prey to come to them. Or they'll go out at night and hunt prey in a vicinity of where their rodent burrow is. One of the major no-nos with any species of snake is going to be handling it just before or just after eating. And with majority of the snakes that I've had, it can be fine, but there are some that do get spooked, and if you handle them or disrupt them or stress them out in any way before they get a meal, they're not going to eat. They're not going to eat at all. And it's going to be very difficult and can be stressful for their keeper to try to get them back on food and understand why they're not eating. Especially if they're following advice that they feel was given to them by the pet store they bought it from, and they feel like that's expert advice. The other is holding them after. So after an animal's eaten, again, most will be okay, but there are a significantly large group of any snake that if you handle them after they have eaten a meal, immediately after, they do risk a high risk of regurgitation. I've had animals regurgitate just from being spooked and changing their waters too close to after they've had a meal. So it's something as a precaution that I would just get used to feeding your animal in their enclosure, preferably under your supervision with whatever prey you decide to feed. It lowers the risk of you having to interact with them before or after they took that meal. Avoid stressing them out. Avoid them not eating and avoiding regurgitation. Some others that have floated around for several years and you might see out there, the heat rock. Do not use a heat rock. You want to use a heating pad or a heating emitting light bulb, a heat emitting panel, something with a thermostat or a dimmer on it so it's not too hot for the animal. These things will get up to 140 to 150 degrees and will burn your animal, and I've seen some horrific burns on the stomachs of these animals, and it's totally avoidable. And these heat rocks are still for sale out there, so be careful because they could recommend them to you. Reptile carpeting. I was just starting and told we should use reptile carpeting. And at that point it wasn't really Reptile branded, it was at Home Depot or local hardware store, and you'd get basically AstroTurf and cut it to size and put it in your tank. But this stuff can harbor bacteria, it's very hard to get clean. You're going to want to go with some substrate that is something that holds more humidity and can be spot cleaned more regularly. potentially disinfected with an F10 or a hexachlorodyne, something of this sort. Ball pythons and reptiles carry salmonella is another one that was thrown around. Now, that being said, I have had salmonella once in my life, but it was not from a reptile. It was from improper handling of food at a restaurant. But in 30 years of keeping reptiles, I have not had salmonella. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take precautions in washing your hands, I'd say before and after you handle your animals, or using sanitizer in between holding animals or after holding animals on your hands, but I wouldn't let this deter you from owning a reptile or keeping a reptile. Well guys, I hope you found this video helpful and it can help you avoid making some of the mistakes I've had to learn the hard ways over the years. If we've missed any that you know of, any myths about ball pythons or any kind of snake for that matter, leave it in the comments down below. And if you got something you've been told that you really don't trust to be true, you think it might be a myth, put it in the comments down below. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Over half the people watching this channel are not subscribed. It would help us out big time. If you want to see more videos like this, just give it a little click. See you on the next one. Bye.